Hey Chief, welcome to Thursday Collection Connection. We're playing a new variation on that game. It's just an excuse to talk about records. I play the game with my brother, Plastic Eric, who's over on the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel. Every Monday he shows a record. Every Thursday I show a record. And the connective tissue is that the albums have to in some way relate to the album shown in the previous video. Now we're trying a brand new twist on this. Eric did this for his most recent video on Monday about Led Zeppelin, and in a bald-faced attempt to boost retention and engagement and to see if we can get people to play along, we are adjusting the rules a little bit so that we do not actually name the connection, and instead we're looking for you to guess the connection. I think initially I conceived that people could play along by just making a connection in the comments to something in their collection from the album that was talked about in the episode. That never really happened, so we're going to try this and see if we get people to play along with us. We are going to lay out a difficult, we're kind of feeling our way around this a little bit, flying by the seat of our pants. We will throw out a degree of difficulty from 1 to 10, 1 being basically you don't need to know anything other than watching the video. You don't need to know either of the acts involved. Something like recently Eric connected Van Halen's 1984 to Taylor Swift's 1989, and just by watching the video it's probably pretty easy to pick up on the fact that they were both album titles named for years. Going all the way up to a 10, which would be fairly arcane information about both bands that they have in common. That said, the closer it would get to a 10, the more careful we would be to include the pertinent info in the video, at least for one side of the equation, and maybe you can make the connection to the other side of the equation. And yeah, we're going to see how that plays out. And so with that, in Eric's last video, he did talk about Led Zeppelin's Led Zeppelin album. It's the third time I think we've played Led Zeppelin on the collection, all Eric's plays, because I don't own any Led Zeppelin. And I confess that this time I did not listen to the album. I didn't have time with all this kind of focus on trying to create the new format. But my feelings on Led Zeppelin in general are expressed in previous videos, more or less indifferent. I wouldn't say I dislike them, but they are, as purveyors of almost, the quintessential 70s rock band, just was never my scene. And again, I'll mention my favorite Led Zeppelin song is Fool in the Rain. That gives you an idea how out of step I am with the average Led Zeppelin fan. Now, one thing I did notice in doing a little research on Led Zeppelin is that their first album, depending on how you view Coda, is the only album that did not go to #1 for them in the UK. And interestingly, the only one, save for Led Zeppelin 4, that did not go to #1 in the US. I'm not quite sure the story there, but Led Zeppelin 4 topped out at #2 on the charts. But it was a slightly more modest hit. I think it was #6 in the UK. I forget exactly where it was in the US for their debut. So they were very much about album sales. And Coda, which you either look at, I guess, as a new album or a kind of what it is, which was archival music after John Bonham passed away, that weren't just from the archives, because they did put overdubs onto the songs, but they were all songs from out of the archive, but unreleased songs from out of the archive. So I'm not sure how you view Coda as a studio album or as more of a curiosity of sort of outtakes, but that one aside, all of their albums through In Through the Outdoor, between Led Zeppelin 2 In Through the Outdoor, hit #1. Their biggest single Surprising, and I'm just doing this to contrast it with the connection that I'm going to talk about here in a moment, is A Whole Lot of Love, which was a number 4 hit in the US, but they were not really about singles. They've always been sort of on album-oriented radio, and you don't need me to tell you a whole lot more about Led Zeppelin, Pant, Plant, Page, Jones, and Bonham, and they are bigger than my channel will ever be. So that was the album that he presented. I will take the time to listen to it when I have a little more time, but it did not happen in the last couple of days. Okay, so I'm not quite sure how to do this segue without telling you what the connection is, but the album that I will be talking about is Garbage. Their self-titled debut from 1995 was a significant record. Interesting. It came for me in the time of my doldrums, where kind of starting with Nevermind and the outbreak of grunge, for whom Butch Vig of Garbage is partially responsible. For Nevermind, he was the producer on that album and produced other significant albums of the era by L7, and shoot, I'm already going to forget who it was. I'm trying to pack too much information into my head before I start talking. But yeah, this was the period during which I was kind of falling out of love with music a little bit. It didn't feel like it was speaking to me. It wasn't for me. And 1995 was kind of my nadir, the lowest ebb of music. I was buying things by bands like Blues Traveler and Dave Matthews Band and Hootie and the Blowfish that I didn't really care about, but seemed like kind of, that's fine, I guess. But I wasn't really engaged with the music, and it wasn't really until 97 with some Ben Folds and Radiohead's OK Computer that I really got re-engaged. So after about 5 years of being lost in the wilderness. But this came out during that time. I did like the single, Stupid Girl, which happens to be Garbage's biggest single. It went, I don't think it went to number 4, so that's not the connection. And I should point out that the fact that it is a self-titled debut, as Led Zeppelin's first album was a self-titled debut, is not the connection. There are several other connections that could be made, but I will try and steer you away from those. Also, the fact that their debut album was produced by a band member, Jimmy Page or Butch Vig on here. Jimmy Page continued to produce all the Led Zeppelin albums, and Butch Vig has had a hand in producing all the Garbage albums, but it has been more as a group. I think most of the latter Garbage albums are considered produced by Garbage and often another person. Billy Bush, I know, is one who's appeared on a couple as a producer. So he didn't solely produce all those albums, so that is not the kind of connection either. But at the time, I actually bought the CD single for Stupid Girl. I wasn't convinced that Garbage was going to be something that I would like long term, but I could not resist the bass line for Stupid Girl. I think it's one of the best bass lines in pop, and never get tired of it. Just kind of that rolling do 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 do. I'm all about it, and I should probably cut that part out. I'm going to look like an idiot. But I was familiar with a lot of the singles from the album. They made significant airplay, even though chart-wise, and I'm talking a lot about chart information, but the connection has nothing to do with charts. But they both, surprisingly to me, never had a huge hit album in the charts, or really a huge hit single in the charts. I think Stupid Girl was the best, but there was only a handful that even charted in the US. And they are Mostly from the US, the three guys who are Butch Vig and Duke Erickson and Steve Marker are all from the US, and they were forming the band and went looking for a singer in looking for a female singer. They thought that female voice is what they wanted, and it took them a while. But they found Shirley Manson from Scotland, who'd been singing in a band called Angelfish. And Vig and Erickson, I believe, had been in the band Spooner together. But I think this was Steve Marker's first band. But they had all sort of approached it from the production side and had been doing remixes and things, and try to take sort of the remix aesthetic and thought and kind of the creating of sounds, collaging of sounds into the songwriting, into making original music. And they ultimately decided they wanted a female singer. And again, like Led Zeppelin, but not the connection. It was a very put together band then. Most of them had already been in bands, and it was a deliberate attempt to put together a band rather than just kind of starting a band with people that you knew in your neighborhood kind of thing. But as far as I know, all of the members of Led Zeppelin are English. But yeah, Super Vixen, well, which I really liked. I love the dead stop in the hook of that song. That everything just went quiet. And Queer and Only Happy When It Rains certainly made some noise. But in addition to that, they had Vow and Milk as singles that didn't quite chart as high, but quite a number of of singles from the album. Yeah, I was also looking as I was trying to make some kind of other connections. A lot of sort of Grammy nominations, but I think no wins at all for Garbage. Whereas Led Zeppelin, maybe not a recording academy kind of band, but nonetheless they got 3, I think, Grammy nominations, and one won. So much better ratio, even though they had a much smaller pool. I think there was like 17 or something Grammy nominations over the years for Garbage. Yeah, and they've broken up sort of occasionally, but continue to reconvene and to put out albums as recently as 2021 with No Gods, No Masters. And it's the same lineup of Erickson and Masters and Vig and Manson. But it's strange, since I did not buy the album at the time in '95, and it was only with this deluxe reissue that has some B-sides and stuff on it. There was maybe a 20-year on, so it was probably around 2015 that I got it. Listening to the whole album feels a lot more familiar than it seems like it should. The song Take Me Now is one I like a lot. The chorus, at least, I feel like maybe the verses need something a little more memorable, but when it breaks into that chorus, I really love that chorus. It's one of my favorite things on the record. But Not My Idea, and As Heaven Is Wide, and all these songs strike my ears familiar. So apparently I've listened to this more often than I maybe thought that I had. But I did not own the album until relatively recently. But it's a good one. It's a solid one. It's one that I missed, even though that I was aware of it in the mid-90s. I was just kind of in a music funk at that time, and concerned that anything that sounded like it had a bit of grit and noise on it was going to be alienating. That was going to be kind of under the grunge umbrella and get on my nerves. But that said, my connection is not specific to the debuts of Garbage and Led Zeppelin. It would apply to any album that you would compare them to. So it's more about the band than it is about this specific record. But both records are emblematic of the connection, and that same connection could be made just between any albums. I could have connected In Through the Outdoor and No Gods, No Masters using the same connection. So that's my hint. I would say that it's maybe an 8 out of 10 difficulty without the clues that I have laid in the video. With the clues, maybe a 6. But we are out to stump you, and anyone who can guess, the first guess, that is the connection that we intended will get a shout out in the next video. And maybe you can get a shout out if you come up with an alternate connection that is more than super surface level. I don't know, we'll have to feel that out together about what seems like saying that there's 4 people in Led Zeppelin and 4 people in Garbage is not that remarkable. It's not unusual. It is something that they have in common, but it's kind of a lame connection. So a little deeper than that. And yeah, we will hopefully get some guesses in the comments as to the connection between 1969's Led Zeppelin from Led Zeppelin and 1995's Garbage from Garbage. Again, it's not that it's a self-titled debut. But yeah, with that, that's all I got. Let's see if this goes anywhere. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.